Not unlikely, not complicated, untenable. That is his assessment of Harry and Meghan ever returning to Britain together. Tonight, we are going through exactly why he reached it, the money behind that word, the geographic divide that no compromise easily bridges, what Angel and Andrew Lowy add from their own independent research, and what July's Invictus event may reveal that months of speculation simply cannot. Let's start with the financial picture because Bauer's entire argument is built on it, and it deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed as tabloid noise. He made some very poor strategic errors, thinking she could profit from the title without any consequence without paying the Jews. And of course there in the end, I have no doubt there'll come a day when they both lose their titles and their children too, because they will just be forced to go too far for their own survival. And at that moment the same will happen to them as what happened to Prince Harry reportedly inherited approximately £10 million from Princess Diana's estate when he turned 30 in 2014. Reports in September 2024 indicated a further payment of roughly £8 million on his 40th birthday from a trust the late Queen Mother reportedly established for her great-grandchildren. Those are substantial sums. By most people's standards, they represent genuine, lasting financial security. And it would be wrong to start this conversation by pretending Harry is struggling in any ordinary sense of the word. But Bauer's estimated annual running cost for the Sussex lifestyle sits between $3 million and $6 million a year. Set those two things next to each other, and the arithmetic becomes uncomfortable over time. Regardless of how large the initial inheritance was, a fixed amount depleted at $6 million a year has a horizon. It is not infinite, and it does not renew itself the way an income stream renews itself. When it is gone, the question of how to replace it becomes urgent in a way it was not when the initial sums were sitting in the account. The heat is on. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Charity disaster, reputational disaster, professional disaster, financial disaster. It's all coming. The components that make up that annual figure are not guesswork, tabloid estimation, or numbers drawn from unfriendly sources trying to construct a damaging picture. The Montecito property carries a mortgage. Security costs are ongoing and significant. The British government no longer provides the level of protection that came with working royal status. So, the Sussexes fund their own arrangements at a level appropriate to a family of their public profile. And those arrangements are not inexpensive. Staffing costs at the scale required to run the Sussex operation are visible through company filings, and the legal costs across recent years have been extraordinary. Court records from Harry's case against the Daily Mail publisher showed approved budgets of roughly £4 million per side in his earlier settlement with the publisher of The Sun was widely reported to have exceeded £10 million. These are figures discussed in official legal proceedings and reported by major outlets. They are part of the documented public record, not estimates drawn from social media speculation. Bauer is not describing a financial mystery when he arrives at $3 to $6 million annually. He is adding up costs that are publicly known and noting that the income side of the equation has been under consistent pressure across the same period that several of those costs were at their highest. Charles has made it very clear that he wants Harry back. You know, we saw it in Harry's book. Don't make my life a misery, boy. Don't make my final years a misery, boy. Charles's dearest wish is to be reconciled with his son. If Palace Insider is giving you the full picture on this story, hit the like button. It costs nothing, and it helps the channel reach more people who want this kind of analysis. The income picture matters here because of how deal-based income works differently from a regular salary. A major commercial deal arrives, brings in a large amount, and then ends. The gap before the next deal is uncertain in length, and the next deal is never guaranteed to match the scale of the previous one. There is no payment showing up reliably on the first of every month the way there would be from a salaried role or a long-term contract. Instead, the pattern runs. A large deal, a quiet period, the hope that another major opportunity arrives before the reserves are drawn down too far. The Netflix partnership was the most significant income source the Sussex commercial operation carried, and its equity exit in March 2026 removed the most reliable large revenue stream in the picture. The Spotify deal ended earlier without the replacement that was presumably expected when it was signed. The As Ever brand has been tracked by Newsweek using similar web data and American visitors to the site. The only Market the brand currently serves fell from 108,000 in December 2025 to 61,500 in April 2026, nearly halved in 4 months in the one market where a visit can become a sale. This is the financial landscape against which Bauer uses the word untenable, not a crisis in the dramatic tabloid sense. A structural pressure that does not resolve itself by continuing the same approach and waiting for the next big deal to arrive. At war over money, they need $10 million now. Now let's talk about what untenable actually means in Bauer's specific framing, because it is a precise argument and it is worth laying out clearly rather than summarizing too quickly and losing what makes it interesting. Bauer's position is that Harry and Meghan arrived at this marriage from fundamentally different backgrounds with fundamentally different frameworks for what a successful and meaningful life looks like, and that those differences were masked during the years when the commercial operation was running well, but become progressively harder to ignore as the circumstances change around them. Harry grew up inside an institution where personal ambition was not measured in earnings or business outcomes. His entire frame of reference for success and purpose was built around public duty, defined role, status within a structure, and service to something larger than himself. Those are the things the monarchy confers on its members. They are not things its members build independently through enterprise or commercial initiative. They are things you inhabit, things that are assigned, things that exist because the institution exists and that derive their meaning from the institution's continued existence. That is not a criticism of Harry. It is an observation about the environment in which he formed his understanding of what purpose feels like, what a meaningful day looks like, and what the word success means when you apply it to your own life rather than to a project or a deal. Of course, there are constant bust-ups, I guess, is the point that I'm making. And of course, there is tension over Harry's desire to spend time in the United Kingdom, but Meghan knows she needs to come back, too. She's going to have to turn back on her word, and that is for financial reasons. Meghan came from a very different background with a very different set of reference points. Her framework for what success looks like was built around professional achievement, individual projects, and the ability to shape commercial ventures on her own terms. Bauer argues that her goals have always been oriented toward building things rather than serving an institution, toward authorship and enterprise rather than duty and continuity. In his interpretation, she measures a good year differently from the way Harry measures a good year and always has. When the deals are large, the brand is strong, and the public attention is high, those different orientations can be entirely invisible. The money coming in, the joint branding, the shared public platform, and the forward momentum of building something new can paper over any underlying divergence in what each person is actually working toward and where they feel most purposeful. Both people can be doing something that feels meaningful and successful, while the circumstances support both of their frameworks simultaneously. And there may be no visible indication that anything is misaligned. But when the deal flow slows, when the large contracts stop arriving at the same scale, when the commercial operation requires daily management decisions and grinding consistency rather than high-profile launches, the underlying difference in what success means to each person becomes harder to absorb. One person's idea of what a good life looks like begins pulling in a different direction from the others, and there is no longer enough external momentum to keep that from becoming visible. That is the crossroads Bauer describes. Not a single dramatic rupture. Not a crisis that arrived on a specific date with a clear cause that both people could point to and address. A slow divergence, becoming observable as the circumstances that masked it gradually change around the two people at the center of it. A divergence that has no villain and no single turning point, which makes it in some ways harder to address than a crisis would be. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you never miss what we cover next. And drop your honest take in the comments. Harry and Meghan want to destroy. They might want to be there, but they want to destroy. That's why they're going ahead. That's why they're putting on smiley faces. That's why they're doing all sorts of things. But I don't believe in what they want to do at all. I think they're crooks and nasty people to try and win. Angela Lavin approaches the monarchy closely for years were identifying genuine incompatibilities that the public narrative of the romance was not capturing at the time. The reason Looney's remarks continue to attract attention in 2026, when they were first made years before the marriage itself, is not that they are definitive or that early concerns automatically prove late outcomes. It is that they were early. When someone identifies potential problems before they become obvious to the wider public and later developments appear to echo those concerns, people naturally pay closer attention to what was said and why. Not because early concern guarantees accurate prediction, but because it suggests the observer was looking at something specific rather than simply reacting to events after the fact. The pattern across all three observers is what gives this conversation a weight that any single biographer's view would not carry on its own. Bauer, Levon, and Looney are working from different research bases, different areas of professional focus, and different years of access to different people and documents. They have different relationships with the story and different reasons for the conclusions they have reached. They reach those conclusions through different routes, but they keep arriving at overlapping observations that Harry and Meghan may want different things from their future, that the institution is unlikely to provide what would make a return acceptable to both of them, and that the financial pressure on the current arrangement makes its indefinite continuation increasingly difficult without something significant changing on at least one of the major dimensions. Three independent lines of research pointing in broadly the same direction without coordination between them. That is what makes the conversation more substantial than one biographer's opinion in a book he needs to sell, which is the dismissal that tends to come first whenever Bauer in particular enters the discussion. Now, let's address the counterargument directly because it deserves proper treatment before we move to July, and because the people making it are not simply defending the couple without reason. The people who push back most forcefully on Bauer's framing make two related points. First, that a couple's appearance schedule and individual project choices are not reliable indicators of deeper marital problems. People have separate projects and travel separately in perfectly healthy marriages all the time. And reading an Atlantic-sized tension into a travel itinerary is a significant interpretive leap. Second, that Meghan has stated publicly and on the record that she sees the relationship as lasting and strong, and those statements are part of the public record and deserve to be taken seriously. Both of those points are valid and should be stated clearly. The response to them from commentators like Bauer and Levon is that what they are describing is not the presence of open conflict or even conscious disagreement between two people who are clearly aware of a problem. It is the presence of structural tension, the kind that does not necessarily show up in how a couple behaves at public events which have a clear beginning and end and a shared purpose that temporarily aligns different priorities into one visible, coherent direction. What the biographers are focused on is not the events themselves, but what happens when the scheduled engagement ends and everyday life resumes with its different pressures, different financial realities, and different pull in different geographic and institutional directions. The Australia trip in April is a useful illustration of this distinction. They appeared together, they presented well, and they gave the impression of a partnership moving in the same direction. A tour has a beginning and an end. It does not settle the question of what each person wants the years after it to look like. Both things can be true simultaneously. The public appearance is genuine and the structural tension is also real. Those are not mutually exclusive, and the distinction matters. Now let's talk about July because it is the next moment when observation replaces speculation, and something publicly observable actually happens. Harry is expected to attend an Invictus Games-related event in Britain this summer. The Invictus Project is the one most closely associated with him personally. It draws genuine praise even from people who are deeply critical of the Sussexes on other fronts, because its impact on wounded veterans is documented and tangible. His attendance is widely expected. What observers will be watching closely is the detail around the attendance, and specifically whether Meghan appears alongside him in Britain or remains in California. Both outcomes will be interpreted, and both interpretations have some validity depending on your existing reading of the situation. If Meghan does not attend, the commentators who have been arguing for different priorities and separate paths will point to her absence as further supporting evidence for the direction they have been identifying. If she does attend, those who think the crossroads narrative is overstated will use her presence to push back against the argument. Neither outcome would be conclusive. A presence or absence at one event does not settle a years-long question about marital direction, competing priorities, and two people's fundamentally different ideas about what the future should look like. Public appearances have a beginning and an end, and they do not resolve structural questions about private preferences and long-term direction. But the July event adds one more data point to a sequence that experienced observers have been tracking carefully, and it gives the next round of commentary something specific and observable to work from rather than the same structural analysis recycled from the same sources for the fifth time. Bauer has been specifically skeptical about the possibility of Harry taking on any part-time royal role, indicating he does not believe such an arrangement is likely to materialize, even if it has been explored informally. That view may be wrong, but it aligns with the broader argument about institutional incompatibility that Levon also makes. From her own angle, a part-time role would require the institution to offer something it has not previously offered to anyone. And it would require both Harry and Meghan to want the same version of what that role looked like, which is precisely the underlying question the entire debate keeps returning to. Here is the full picture when all the pieces are placed together in the same frame. Bauer says untenable. The financial backdrop includes estimated annual costs of $3 to $6 million, multiple major revenue streams that have ended or contracted significantly, and a commercial brand whose American web traffic nearly halved in 4 months. Levon identifies a structural incompatibility between what the Sussexes would want from a return to royal life and what the institution is designed to offer. Looney suggests the concerns predate the marriage by years. The biographers have not been sued. Neither palace has denied the core claims in any of these accounts. None of this requires a villain. None of it requires a single dramatic event that explains everything. That is precisely Bauer's point. Untenable does not describe a crisis. It describes a structural situation. Two people whose ideas of a meaningful life pull in different directions. A fixed inheritance shrinking against a recurring cost. Opportunities concentrated on opposite sides of an ocean. A sense of role and belonging that one place can provide and the other cannot for reasons that neither person fully controls and that no amount of goodwill or good intentions resolves on its own. Bauer is not predicting a divorce when he uses that word, and this is not a story predicting one either. It is worth being direct about that, because the word untenable attracts that interpretation whether or not it is the one intended. The couple's representatives have denied reports of marital difficulties. Meghan has stated publicly that she sees the relationship as enduring. The biographers could be wrong. The financial picture could improve. The geographic tension could find a resolution that nobody has yet publicly described. But the conversation keeps returning to the same set of observations from the same set of credible long-term observers who have been covering this family for years. The structural tensions Bauer identified remain visible in the available evidence. The financial data, the commercial performance numbers, the geographic reality, the institutional incompatibility, they have not changed because the public appearances have continued or because the official statements describe a different picture. The statements and the data are describing different things, and the data is not in dispute. The one word that started this conversation. Everything that follows from it is already in the public record, waiting to be read in sequence. What do you think? Does Bauer's untenable assessment match the evidence as you read it? Or do you think the marriage is more stable than the biographers are suggesting? And if so, which part of their argument do you find weakest? Drop your honest take in the comments below. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you never miss what we cover next. And the like button keeps this channel doing this kind of deep analysis on the stories other channels scheme past. We will see you for the next one.